everybody, a warm welcome to Wisdom from North. My name is Jannica and I'm now at Tjøme at the Evolving Consciousness Conference with a lot of wonderful speakers, and among them Dr. Jude Currivan. She is a scientist, a planetary healer, a visionary, and a cosmologist. She holds a PhD in archaeology, researching ancient cosmology, and she has a master in physics. She has written several books, including The Eighth Chakra, Hope, Cosmos, which she co-wrote with Erwin Laszlo, and The Wave. And one more, I think, the 13th step. Now, Jude, thank you so much for taking time. You just had a talk, and welcome to Wisdom from North, and welcome to Norway.
Thank you so much, Annika, and it's wonderful to be here. And this Evolving Consciousness Conference is just such a powerful coming together of people with very diverse views. But over the weekend, we've had a wonderful time, haven't we? Just weaving exploration and experience and discovery and together and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. And I've gotten to know you, and I feel like I've gained so much wisdom already. And now I want you to share that with our audience, because you've had one foot in the metaphysical world and one foot in the science world. And because you have a great education, but you also have been walking in between worlds. And can you share how this all started? Because I know it started very early.
It did. Well, it started when I was about 4 years old. And one evening I was settling down to sleep in my bedroom, and a discarnate light came into the room. And I began to hear a voice, as well as see the light. I began to hear a voice. And 4 years old, hey, what's unusual about that? But from that moment on, I began literally to have clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairkinesthetic, when you sense something, experiences, precognition, being able to sort of have a sense of the future. But also I had this incredible fascination and passion for studying ancient Egyptian wisdom teachings, and also quantum physics and astronomy. So here I was at 4 in a very working class family in the north of England. My dad was a coal miner, having these incredible experiences and studying this amazing understanding. And so I was walking between worlds, literally, and I was experiencing multi-dimensional realities, and not at that age realising that was quite unusual, which I guess it was.
And so you nevertheless chose to go into Oxford University and study all these things. Yeah. How was that like when you had perceived, reality in a different way than maybe your friends or peers?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and it's a very good point. From the age of 4, as I grew up, I was studying more, I was experiencing more. But what I really wanted to understand is, how did my multidimensional experiences bridge with the world of physical reality? At the Sistine Chapel, where there is this incredible mural painted by Michelangelo, and what it shows is the origin, Genesis. And it shows the finger of God reaching out to touch the finger of Adam. And they don't quite touch. And there's this little bit of lightning, of electricity between them. If you have a look at it, there's a light between them. And for me, I wanted to understand what that was about. How did the consciousness that I was experiencing and exploring, how did that consciousness in some way create the physical world? And I figured that studying quantum physics and cosmology at Oxford University, which is very prestigious, was a way to understand how that worked. Having said that, although the quantum physics was fascinating, I learned a lot. The cosmology was very interesting. Black holes had just been discovered. And I won
You studied that with Stephen Hawking, didn't you?
Well, I was in a seminar with Stephen Hawking and a scientist and mathematician called Roger Penrose when I was 19. Well, I wasn't 19 actually. Yeah, I was about 19. And I wrote an essay about it that won a university prize on black holes, which is really interesting because all these years later, the mathematics that describe black holes is being used to take physics beyond the quantum level, beyond relativity. So it's like I've come full circle or full spiral. But the disappointing thing was that in all the teachings, there was not ever one mention of consciousness. It was all physical reality. It was all seen as being some random creation. The Big Bang Theory was just gaining ground then. So certainly science was taking steps forward, but it was seeing everything as purely physical, as purely material. And there was never any mention of consciousness, which, you know, for me, having experienced what I had since 4 years old, it's like, this is like the elephant in the room. This is missing and it needs to be brought into this understanding.
So is it still like that science is not acknowledging consciousness?
It's beginning to, but it's coming at it from a whole number of different directions. You know the old story about the elephant in a darkened room, and somebody sort of holds the tail and goes, "Oh, what's this? This feels like a tail." And somebody else grasps the elephant's ear and goes, "This sort of feels like an ear," and somebody else touches the trunk, but none of them understand that it's the whole elephant until the light goes on. Right. And we're at that point now, I think, in science, that it's coming together and somebody is going to turn the light on very soon. But what's happened since I was at Oxford University is ever since science, through things like string theory and loop quantum gravity, have been trying to understand how the world of the theory that describes the world at very small levels, the quantum theory, gels with the theory that describes the world at very large scales, relativity theory, because they don't actually connect with each other. In quantum theory, there is essentially no thing as space and time. In the quantum realm, time is something outside that. It doesn't have an answer for the meaning of time. In the world of relativity, is not quantized. So they don't communicate with each other. So we've got two theories that supposedly describe the world, but they don't describe the complete world. The other thing is, of course, is since then we've discovered what is called dark matter, which is something, nobody knows what, that seems to pervade space and hold matter together. Because just the matter and the energy we see isn't enough to stop rotating galaxies flying off. There isn't enough gravity in the matter that we observe to keep a galaxy together. So there's this understanding or this perception that there's something called dark matter that does that, but we don't know what it is. And then we discovered a few years ago, to everybody's surprise, that the universe, the expanding universe, instead of slowing down, is accelerating. And that dark energy, so-called dark energy, which Einstein first came across as a result of his mathematics of relativity, he didn't like the idea. He didn't want the idea of an expanding universe, which this implied, so he took it out of the equations.
Really?
He didn't trust the mathematics, and I love Albert, but he didn't trust his own mathematics enough to keep what he called a cosmological constant in. Or put it this way, he wanted a constant universe, but the universe is not, it's expanding. So now, again, having realised that the expansion is accelerating, why? What is it? Is it a feature of space-time itself, or is it something else? So dark energy, dark matter. Now, the thing is that the description of the world with quantum theory and the description of the world through relativity, not only do they not talk to each other, but they don't explain dark matter and dark energy. And when you add all of this up, matter and energy that we see, that we can observe, that we can measure, that quantum theory describes, doesn't explain, but describes, relativity theory describes, but doesn't explain, is only 4%. 96% of the universe is missing, because 96% of the universe is dark energy and dark matter. So we're at that place now, which is an amazingly exciting place to be, because the other things that are coming forward through many other, different areas of research, is that matter and energy and space and time, therefore, are not fundamental. There's something deeper. And a lot of physicists at the leading edge are figuring out that this is what we call information.
Okay.
We can describe the universe in informational terms.
Is that your experience as well? I mean, since you have been walking in these other dimensions?
Well, yes, it is. But the thing is that once you start saying that information is more fundamental than space and time and matter and energy, it's a slippery slope, because you can't ultimately have information without consciousness.
Right.
And when you start going down that route, you also, from many different perspectives, the mathematics that are being revealed to underlie the patterns that are being found across all scales of existence, from the very small to the very large. People who are studying earthquakes and weather patterns and frequency of conflicts and how the stock market works and are talking about fractals. They're talking about how all we call physical reality, when you distill it down, has these patterns called fractal patterns in them. Now, the point of fractal patterns is they scale up and they scale down. So a triangle is a fractal pattern. If I scale this triangle up, it can be the tiniest triangle or the largest scale, but its relationship is the same. That's very simple. But when computer analysis is applied to complex systems, such as the outlines of coasts, or river patterns, deltas and river patterns, or the way that animals breed, or the way that the internet works, and these fractal patterns are being seen to underlie everything. And so now all of that's coming together with this moving into this informational universe, and realizing that we can begin to describe and perhaps understand reality as a hologram.
Right.
And that's what I've experienced since I was 4 years old.
Oh, but that's interesting, because I would like to know what a hologram is. And you've explained it once before, but it's a difficult concept in a way to understand fully. So if we can go into that hologram.
I'll be delighted to. But what I would also suggest that the folks who are watching us, just Google as well, hologram, HOLOGRAM. And if you do Google images, you'll get some images of holograms. And I find that images of holograms just speak to us. It's like when we see them, they're like a mandala. They're like a cosmic pattern. And when we look at these images, we know what the hologram is. Whereas when I talk about it, I'm using words, whereas the hologram is visual. And as a mystic, as somebody who's walked between worlds, as well as a scientist and all the rest of it, mystics through the ages have done what I've done and explored different worlds and explored consciousness. And it's really difficult to come back from that experience and find everyday words to describe it, because English and Norwegian are not cosmic languages as such, but mathematics,
Numbers
are, and you can describe any pattern mathematically and in waveform, and you can describe the mathematics of a hologram is waveforms. So our speak the words of a hologram, but I just invite everyone to go to Google Images and see them for themselves. The basic form of a hologram is you have a light, a laser light shining on an object. That object could be anything. It could be an apple, it could be you, okay? It could be a person. The light then splits into two, and what happens is that light then goes through different journeys and then recombines. So what you do when it recombines, you create a two-dimensional wave pattern of that object. That three-dimensional object is then made into a two-dimensional representation, okay, of that object, whatever the object is. When you then shine a light through that two-dimensional plate, a hologram of the object, a three-dimensional hologram of the object is projected, whether again it's an apple or a yarnica, or if anybody's seen Star Wars, Princess Leia coming out of R2-D2. So basically, and the point is that if you look at that hologram, you can walk around it. It will look three-dimensional, and they're becoming more and more sophisticated now, holographic technology. But we're still at the very beginning of holograms and holographic technology and this emerging holographic understanding of reality. But the thing with a hologram as well is if you try and divide it into 1 million or 10 million or whatever many number of bits you'd like to, every bit represents the whole. So if it's a hologram of an apple and you cut it into many, many different pieces by light, yeah, every tiny little bit will be a full apple. So that is a characteristic of holograms, is that the whole is represented in every aspect of the microcosm, and every part of the microcosm, it reflects the whole. So it's the ancient hermetic view, as above, so below, as within, so without, scales up. The patterns scale up on all scales, from the very tiny to the very large.
Is it kind of like we're a projection?
Yeah, because if we go beyond that, and this is where black holes come in, some not that long ago, leading edge scientists were trying to understand black holes and the information that black holes hold. Because if you think of a black hole normally, generally, up till now, as being thought of as a large star, larger than the sun, that at the end of its lifetime actually is so large that it implodes. Part of it explodes, but the rest of it implodes. But its gravitational attraction is so great that it shrinks to a tiny scale, where the gravity is so strong that not even light can escape, hence black. But around the black hole, think of it as a sphere. The surface of the sphere of the black hole is called an event horizon. And once you go through the event horizon, any information going through the event horizon, in theory, can't escape. Now, there's a slight nudge to that, which is called Hawking radiation. But to cut a very long and very technical story short, a guy called Juan Maldacena discovered, and others such as Leonard Susskind and others, discovered that you could actually describe all the information within a black hole, within a sphere, as being described by its surface area. Now that is weird, because if you think about it, if we have this cup of tea, which I'm very much enjoying drinking, thank you very much, we look at the volume inside, okay? Think of that tea, the volume of tea inside the cup, as holding information, all the information about the tea, all the information about the cup within that volume, okay? Now, if that was, instead of a cup, was a sphere, a star, a black hole, you'd think that all the information of that black hole would be proportional to the volume of the black hole. What you wouldn't expect is that all that information is proportional to the surface area of the black hole. Now, what that does for somebody as intelligent as those folks is that they thought, aha, where have we seen three-dimensional reality being able to be described in a two-dimensional way? The hologram. Because the hologram is the pattern on a two-dimensional plate that when light is passed through creates this three-dimensional projection. So that really began this scientific perspective of being able to describe the whole of physical reality and the universe of space, time, matter, energy in holographic terms.
So in a sense, are we actually the light that's been projected?
In that sense, I would say yes, but I feel we need to go to a slightly different perspective of this. But that's a really great way of beginning to have the sense of this.
So my mind understands it in a way.
Exactly. The step beyond it is that everything that we call reality is consciousness. Everything. Right. Consciousness expressing itself as energy. So it's how consciousness, information, is embodied, yes, within what may be what's called a brain, B-R-A-N-E, as a two-dimensional representation of reality through which consciousness, the light of consciousness, as it were, projects into what we call space-time.
Yeah, so we're everything.
We're everything. But the thing with space-time, with the thing with our universe, is that what we also perceive, and these are work in progress, this isn't like the end, this is the thing. But what this is beginning to do is really bring science and spirit, science and consciousness together, and a much more profound perception of reality than perhaps ever before. But if we consider space-time, we can go back to the Big Bang of 13.8 billion years ago.
Which he told us wasn't a big bang.
Wasn't big, wasn't a bang, but there you go. It was in a sense, if we go back thousands of years, the ancient Indian Upanishads and writings such as the Bhagavad Gita talk about physical reality being the out-breath of Atman, the out-breath of God. And an out-breath is ordered. It begins in the simplest way, but then it grows, it expands. The reason that I call the Big Bang neither big nor bang, because it began almost as a singularity, almost as an infinitely small, but not quite. And I'm working on why it isn't infinite, because if it is infinite, the physics just cannot work with that. Okay. But there's a very good reason why it isn't quite infinitely small. But basically a tiny, tiny, tiny beginning, but in an incredibly ordered way. We often think of bangs, don't we, as explosions, lots of shrapnel going around. But it was incredibly ordered, and all the forces that were in that tiny, tiny first moment of space-time were so exquisitely balanced that they allow this out-breath of Atman to begin to allow within space-time the evolution of stars and galaxies and different generations of stars exploding, but even their explosions are ordered because in the explosions are created heavier elements which eventually form planets around suns such as ours, which enables planets such as the Earth to be created, which enables biological life to begin to evolve. So this amazingly, beautifully ordered, exquisite unfolding. The thing is that when we go back to that first moment of space-time, all essentially, given that matter and energy are equivalent, E equals mc squared, the most famous equation in the whole world, that Einstein showed us that energy and matter are equivalent. So although in very different forms, all the energy that is in our universe now was in the universe at the very beginning. Essentially, everything that makes up the physical realm has been for 13.8 billion years, just in different forms. There is something called the conservation of energy. So from the very beginning of space-time, as a whole cycle of space-time, the energy remains constant. It just changes form. But something does change, and this is crucial, because at that very first moment of space-time, matter, energy, universe, Big Bang, something called entropy was at its lowest point. And entropy in the 19th century was used to describe the states of gases, order and disorder of gases. But more recently, there's an understanding that entropy can also describe information and describe the maximum amount of information that can be held within a three-dimensional space. Same equation, same mathematics. So, at the very beginning of space and time, entropy was at its lowest point. Now, there's a rule of thermodynamics that says entropy can only increase, it can't decrease. Okay? So if entropy is at its lowest level at that very first instance of space and time, it can only increase. It can't go backwards because there's no time to go backwards in. So entropy can only increase through this cycle of the universe. And as entropy increases, first of all, it actually gives us the arrow of time, because we can only, with entropy, it can only move that one way. So that by itself forces an arrow of time within space-time. But the other thing, when we look at entropy as embodying information, as representing the amount of information in a system, it goes from the simplest, ever more complex, ever more information. So consciousness can experience and explore and embody more and more and more complex consciousness.
So we're developing more and more.
Yes, and it's the most perfect, wonderful, exquisite, simple way for consciousness to explore itself.
So we started out being organisms.
Not even then. This is 13.8 billion years ago. We're talking about not even before atoms.
Right.
We're talking at the very get-go. Yeah? We're talking about, before there was light. The universe was not even transparent to light at the very moment of beginning. For the first 380,000 years, sound pervaded as the universe, as space-time expanded. But all the time, this information, this amazingly ordered beginning, was beginning to explore itself and experience and develop and evolve and grow. All the way till now and all the way onwards to this completion of what's often called an adiabatic process, which in the 19th century described the evolution of gases, now is being used to begin to describe the evolution of consciousness within our universe.
Wow. Okay. Let's go back to the now in a way. A lot of people are talking about oneness these days.
Yes.
And then I was thinking, could it be fair to suggest that that can be proven in the theory of non-locality?
Well, very much so. And I think more than that, we had an opportunity after the 19th century, because there was a lot of scientific breakthroughs in the 19th century, and great pioneers such as Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell, and they were really getting massive insights into electromagnetism. We sometimes forget that if we only need to go back about 120, 130 years, And we had no idea about the nature of electromagnetism.
Right.
You know, magnetism was this phenomenon, and electricity, usually through lightning or static electricity, was this phenomenon, but they didn't seem to have anything that connected them. It was only through those powerful insights of scientists like Maxwell and Faraday and others that we began to understand. And of course then too, we only knew, and to connect it with light, because magnetism, electricity, light, something different. There was no knowledge of radio waves, X-rays, the whole electromagnetic spectrum. And yet now it's the basis of our global technologies. So in a way, we're almost at that point in a whole different level now, because I think we're on the verge of a whole new breakthrough. But at the beginning of the 20th century, after these discoveries about electromagnetism, anomalies began to be found. And one anomaly was that when people were trying to explain the heat from an oven. Mm-hmm. Now that doesn't sound too difficult, does it? You know, a hot oven, you get radiated heat. What's hard about that to explain? But that literally, trying to understand that, gave birth to the quantum revolution. Because what was realised is that if, first of all, people were beginning to realise that light could be understood perhaps as a wave, but maybe also as a particle, but not quite yet. They were sort of struggling with things like that. And when you consider light as a wave and heat as a wave, then essentially the heat from an oven should be all wavelengths, all wavelengths. But if you add up all wavelengths, it's infinite. And when I stand next to a hot oven, I'm not being radiated with an infinity of heat. There's a certain amount of heat. Understanding that was done by realising that all waves or all energy is quantised. In other words, it comes in little packets, because quantum means packets of energy. So it's not at all wavelengths. There are specific wavelengths, there's specific packets of energy. So when the heat from a hot oven is analysed, it's not infinite, it's a finite amount because of quantisation. So trying to understand something as simple as that and not being able to, using classical theories, birthed the quantum theory. And then, of course, quantum theorists were discovering that matter and energy, energy could be seen as both wave and particle, that light could be understood as both waves of light and photons of light. But a guy called the Baron Louis de Broglie, very posh but very good scientist, he made the logical step that if waves can be understood as particles, maybe particles could be understood as waves. Mm-hmm. And indeed they can. And that then helped the whole process of helping energy and matter, waves and particles, to be seen as being equivalent. It took Einstein's genius to do the E equals mc squared, but many other geniuses were at work in those days. So there was the energy-matter correspondence, but there was also, at quantum level, the realisation that when anything at the quantum scale was observed, it was changed. You couldn't observe it without changing it. Mm-hmm. And that really should have given us an insight. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at something and it changes it, mm-hmm. it says that you're not separate from that thing. Yeah?
Right.
Okay? Mm-hmm. And then going on from that and realising that Einstein and two others, Polanski and Rosen, decided to have a thought experiment. And the idea was you create two identical quantum entities and then you take them apart. And what they realised, the mathematics forced you to do, is to say that if one of them was switched, the other one would immediately switch. And yet no signal had gone between them through space-time. Because as Einstein showed, and every experiment since has shown, is that no signal through space-time can go faster than the speed of light. But on these twin particles, it was instantaneous, no signal. Okay. Now that's called non-locality,
Right.
or entanglement. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance and hated it. But every experiment has shown its validity. But not only at quantum scales now, it's been shown that quantum entanglement, non-locality, is able to happen between literally molecules, so organic molecules, which are way beyond, bigger than the quantum scale. And now the emerging science is taking that further to say that with non-locality, with an informational universe, everything is interconnected. Ultimately, the whole universe is a coherent, non-locally connected entity.
So that actually basically means that telepathy and everything, it's, well, it explains telepathy, and we can actually then have contact with anybody in space.
Of course. Because the thing there is that, within space-time, the speed of light is a limit. And, one of the things that I'm working on with my next book is to really explain all of this in a really accessible way. But light essentially weaves space and time together. Yeah? It's the fabric of the bedrock of what we call reality. But the point is, if we go to that step of perceiving that all we call reality is consciousness, expressing itself as energy that is holographically manifested at all scales of existence, then we bring together all our experiences within the physical realm, the very small, the very large, because we can explain this at something called the Planck scale, which is where space and time are quantized, and that is unbelievably tiny compared even to the quantum. So we can begin to bring relativity and quantum theory together. We can begin to understand gravity as an implication of all of this, rather than a force of itself, because nobody's found gravitational waves despite intense looking for decades, or gravitons, which the standard theory suggests is the force carrier of the field of gravity. But many people are perceiving, as I have for many years, that we have to consider gravity not as a force as such, but as an implication of the structure of space-time. So it's bringing all those together, but crucially, it's addressing the elephant in the room. It's addressing consciousness and bringing consciousness not just to the centre of a worldview, but consciousness as a whole worldview. Consciousness, energy, entropy, expressed as in this holographic, this cosmic hologram. So it absolutely means that we can bring all that we've called supernatural or paranormal, realising they're not para anything. It's normal. It's not super anything. It's natural. It's just needing to have this bigger picture understanding of a whole worldview rather than the very limited perspective. So it's not throwing out Einstein and all the quantum pioneers, just as they didn't throw out Newton. Newton used to say that he could see so far because he stood on the shoulders of giants. The great pioneers have always understood the debt they owe to those that have gone before. And so our debt now is to all of those who have gone before, but to take their work. And they would have been the first to shout, hurrah! Because the quantum pioneers and Einstein himself were so open. Einstein called what we're describing cosmic mind. It wasn't an old sort of perspective of a God But
did he believe in God?
He did, but he believed in God as cosmic mind, as cosmic consciousness, as infinite being.
A being.
But a being in that sense of not, in human form or whatever, but all pervasive, infinite, eternal consciousness.
So, in the time we're in a special time in a way, and we've all been talking about the Maya calendar and everything. But all this information, it applies actually that if you hurt somebody, you're actually hurting yourself.
This is why I feel that this revolution is fundamental. Because in the past, we've had scientific worldviews that have changed our perspective of our place in the universe and how the universe works. But they've really had less and less to say about who we really are.
Right.
They've had less and less to say about our experiences of love and inspiration and, the sort of things that we've been experiences of telepathy and all the other things that folks have. So they've only been able to address, really, with all the discoveries that have been wonderful and very powerful, they've actually said less and less about, all that is. And what's so incredible now is that this emergent perspective does reconcile science and spirit, science and consciousness, and is happening as we now, through this shift of awareness that is happening on many multidimensional levels, we are literally waking up. We're expanding our awareness. And as part of this, in order to enable us to have a context for what's happening, folks are experiencing synchronicities and all the stuff I've been experiencing all my life. More and more and more people are experiencing this, and they're wanting something. They don't necessarily want the old dogma of religions, but they understand at a profound level that they are spiritual beings. But there's no worldview, or there has not been a worldview, given the prevalence of science, that's really given them the context and the validation and the verification of this. And this is what this is doing. And it's providing us with a context that isn't the end word. The journey continues, but it's providing, just as relativity and quantum theory expanded on the previous worldview, but still didn't really enable us to remember who we really are, or, our consciousness. Now this is taking us to a whole new level of understanding, where we no longer have to be schizophrenic. We no longer have to say, well, we're in the physical world and science says it's like this, but I'm feeling like this, and what's this? And emotions and love and joy and inspiration and gratitude and all of these other experiences. It's like, they're all welcome in this whole worldview, which is what ancient cosmologists tried to do. All the ancient cosmologists, however they did it, however unable they were to express it in what we would see as modern day scientific language, they were trying to describe and explain and understand the entire cosmos of experience. They weren't dividing the physical realm and saying everything in this realm is real and everything else I feel or I experience or I dream or whatever somehow is not real. We're going to take it outside and ignore it. This worldview, for the first time and with a new scientific language, can begin to help us understand not only the cosmos, not only consciousness, but who we really are at a level of profundity, a level of interconnection, a level, as you absolutely say, a knowingness that if I hurt you, I hurt myself, because ultimately we are all one. A more powerful understanding of that than ever before.
So would it be safe to only follow your heart all the way. Because, we have the mind and, we're trying to be sensible all the time. Is it safe? I mean, I know, or I feel like we're coming from love, but is it safe in the third dimension in a way to only go from the heart all the time?
Oh, we could do another hour or two on this one. As a healer and as someone who's worked and experienced and explored consciousness all my life, my perspective is that as spiritual beings undertaking a human experience, when we come into incarnation, we take on a personality, a persona, an ego mind. And the job of our ego mind is to persuade us that we're separate, because part of the exploration of consciousness has been the exploration of what's often called duality or polarity. I experience myself in relationship to you and to others. But what that does, that perception of us, that's who we are, that's ourself. What is so wonderful about our human experiences, one of the things, is our emotions. Yeah? And we feel our emotions, we feel them in our gut, we feel them through our body, we feel love, we feel attraction, we feel a lot of emotions in our hearts. But as we go through lives and life after life, whatever, our experience, if they flow through us, as the Buddhists teach, then we don't hold on to those emotions. But if we do hold on to them, which we very often do, they become a trauma within us. We hold on to them. We hold on to the regrets. We hold on to the anger. We hold on to the love. We hold on to all of them, the whole range. The other thing is with our ego mind persuading us we're separate, the moment we see ourselves as separate, essentially we're moving from the wholeness of love progressively into fear. Okay? So depending on our experiences, our exploration, within our persona, we can hold those traumas and we can embody those fears. Okay? So if we act from our heart, our personal heart, within our personality, any trauma we're going to play out. Yeah? So for example, we find somebody we think is great, okay, really great. But we've had a number of relationships in the past and we've felt very hurt and let down. And so we need someone not to let us down. There's a need within us because we feel that trauma. So we see somebody we like and we go, I like you, I need you, okay? So all that does is we continue to play out the patterns, the traumas, the emotions of our personality. What's happening now, and I write about this in one of my books called The Eighth Chakra and in the 13th Step and others too, is that part of this shift of awareness is we're going beyond the limitations of our personality. And I really feel that many folks seeing us now will be feeling that within themselves. And as we do, we move into what I call the universal heart of the 8th chakra, which is the first of 5 transpersonal levels of awareness. I call them chakras, but to be honest, they're more vibrationary levels of awareness that progressively expand our consciousness to that understanding and embodiment of unity, the oneness of all that is. But the 8th chakra of the universal heart, midway between our heart and our throats, is the portal from our personality perspective to a unity perspective. It's naturally part of us. It's being activated as part of this shift. We can help it along, and I write a lot, and folks can go to my website, judecurrivan.com, to see more about this. But the point is, when we move into the universal heart, that's when I would say, yes, follow that heart. Because the universal heart brings our higher mind, that understanding unity awareness, and our higher self's purpose into a beautiful resolution. So when we're in that awareness, then yes, follow it. But if we're working from the level of the personality and we're still embodying those traumas, and then we say, oh, I listen to my heart, if our heart still hurts, then it's not such a wonderful way shower.
That makes sense. I think our time is up very soon. Is there anything you want to say in the end?
I'd like to say thank you.
Welcome, it was lovely.
And all the wonderful work you're doing, because I feel that bringing, obviously not just what I would love to share and feel privileged to share with everyone, but so many other people who are, you know, exploring and experiencing. And I would like to say that this is all of us. My experiences aren't special. I'm completely and utterly ordinary. You are not, but that goes without saying. But, you know, this is who we really are. This is a process of remembering who we really are. And the more that we can make our choices out of love, even when we follow our personal heart and we go, uh-oh, I'm doing this again, it's still important that we do that and we make choices out of love rather than fear. Then miracles happen. And certainly not just myself, but I know so many people who, when we hear the call of spirit, and we know it, it's that little inner voice, it's that voice of intuition, that is our way shower, that is our guide. And whether we feel it's our higher self or our guide, you know, we're able now to communicate at that level, we're able to experience at that level, and we really are. This is a homecoming to ourselves. This is a journey from fear to love, from loneliness to aloneness to all oneness, and not an all oneness where we lose ourselves, but in my experience, an understanding of all oneness, of unity awareness, where we're actually more ourselves than ever before, because we are wholly ourselves in that understanding.
Thank you so much.
So welcome. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you so much for watching, guys. And much light from Tjøme in Norway.